Right. So basically, speculating, you're gambling. You're hoping
Yeah.
that something out there can, return something as opposed to you just losing your money.
Well, exactly. I mean, there are various forms of speculation,
Hmm.
and I mean, informed speculation does make an awful lot of sense because what you're doing with informed speculation is you're actually quantifying the risk reward on your investment. But most people can't do that,
Hmm.
actually. They don't. And if you look at what happens in the markets, I mean, they've become completely divorced from any fundamentals. So there's no way that there's a risk reward analysis being taking place. What people are doing instead is they're saying the trend is up, buy. And that is the logic. If things are going up, you buy them. If things are going down, you sell them. Now, that's got nothing to do with any common sense. It is pure speculation.
Right. Now, to move into the side effects of all this speculation and basically, interest rate rigging, for the most part, leads to the decreasing of living standards as well as wages. Now, here in America, we have the fight for 15, where no doubt in UK, I'm sure there's unemployed that are fighting for an increased wage of living and things like that. Now, when you talk about central banking and the business cycles that they create with the extension of credit and things like that, how does some of those things factor into the standard of living when it comes to wages? Being that,
Well,
yeah, go ahead, take it.
yeah, sorry, Mike. I mean, I have enormous sympathy for the people who are on the wrong end of this money printing,
Hmm.
because the fight for 15, as you call it. I mean, we have a minimum wage here too, and which was introduced, I think, 10, 15 years ago. Um, you have people who find that the purchasing power of their wages has fallen. And
Hmm.
that's actually what they're trying to correct.
Right.
They don't understand why it has fallen. They just know that it has fallen. They know that prices have gone up, their wages buy less, they can no longer live on what they're being paid. Now, it is, if you like, the result of money printing
Hmm.
and the expansion of credit devaluing the purchasing power of money. That is the problem. The answer to this, unfortunately, isn't to tell employers what their cost base is going to be, which is effectively what you're doing. Because the employer has to make something to sell to the consumer. The consumer actually has the decision as to whether he's going to buy or not the manufacturer. So that the manufacturer has to compete in order to sell his product. Now, in order to compete, he's got to control his costs.
Hmm.
And if he can't afford to pay 15, then he's got to think of another way round. He's either got to buy more machinery so that his £15 an hour earns more, if you like, makes more, or alternatively, he's got to get rid of some of the 15 in order to tailor the volume of his product to the market. So there is something, I'm afraid, in the statement that minimum wages are a deliberate policy of unemployment.
Hmm.
The forcing of minimum wages does, unfortunately, increase unemployment. That's a very tough message to push over. But in Europe, we're finding that this is actually happening another way. When we've introduced, or since we have introduced minimum wages, what has happened is that employers no longer employ people. What they do is they take them on a 0 hours contract basis.
Hmm.
And what that means is you end up working for less than you did before. And if you're working from home, you're sort of doing it's contract work. And you find that actually, instead of getting, in our case, it's something like £8 an hour is the minimum wage. It's a figure like that.
Hmm.
Instead of getting that, you're probably getting £4 an hour because you're not employed anymore. You're on a 0 hours contract. In other words, they will call on your services as and when they want, with very little notice sometimes. And you can find that there isn't enough work for you this month. The
Hmm.
result is that you don't earn nearly as much as you did when you actually fully employed on, say, £6 an hour. They're doing exactly the same thing in France. This is actually a difficulty. I mean, we have the reality, and this is actually the base of the whole thing. When you print money in order to try and manipulate the economy,
Hmm.
what you're doing is you're transferring wealth from the poor to the rich. And that is increasing the level of inequality within the United States and within this country as well. And it's a point which nobody will actually admit to, but it is a fact. And if you read through all the sort of the history of, what has happened when money's been printing, the people who suffer are the poor. The middle classes find they lose all their money as well, and it goes somewhere else. Not necessarily into an identifiably rich person's hands, but if you look at the banks are doing very well, thank you very much. You go to Wall Street, see what's going on there. It's a completely different country from Main Street in Detroit.
Yeah.
It is completely different. Yeah. And it is an effect of inflation. There is a transfer of wealth going on from people in places like Detroit into the financial centers. Mm-hmm. And that is actually where you've got to look for the solution.
Wow.
I'm sorry to say, because I really do sympathize with those on minimum wages, because they are being screwed into the ground by money printing.
Right. Wow. That's it's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that being monetarily uninformed even plays into you falling victim even more, because you have no clue. You think it's just you're not getting paid enough, as opposed to what you're being paid. It's not really cutting anymore. So. Okay, now
right.
Let's transfer into the whole cash aspect. Cashless society. There's been a lot of talk about banks not wanting people to use cash. They prefer to have more control, digitizing things. What's your thought on that?
Well, looking at it from the central bank's point of view, the one area which they don't have control on of people like you and me turning up at the bank because we're worried that the bank can't look after our money, has lost our money, and we want our money back. Mm-hmm. Now, when we get our money back, we want it in cash. We don't want a bank transfer into another bank. We want cash. That is what they would like to stop. I'm not saying that this is entirely the reason for it, but this is a very big motivation, if you like, behind the end of cash. But the reason that this is important is that if I don't like Bank A and I decide to move all my deposits from Bank A into Bank B, if I do it electronically, then what happens is that money, it creates a shortage in Bank A's balance sheet, but they can sort it out overnight in the money markets by borrowing the money back from, let's keep it simplistic, from Bank B. So in other words, Bank A doesn't actually suffer from me turning around and in effect voting with my feet and giving the bank a message, I'm worried about the security of my money here, I really do want to move it somewhere else. Okay? Now that is a very important message. The bank can ignore it now. If Bank B gets worried about Bank A and decides to raise the rates against Bank A, or refuse to lend money to Bank A, then the central bank is in there as ringmaster in the money markets. So Bank A can go to the central bank and say, we're a bit short this tonight. Can we have some overnight help, an overnight facility? And the central bank will say, okay, here's your facility, and this is what it's going to cost. So this way, no bank need ever go bust.
Wow.
If you like.
Yeah.
And of course it's backed up by regulation, because the regulators will say you've got to maintain a certain level of capital, and if you buy these assets you've got to take a haircut, if you buy these assets you don't have to have a haircut, and so on and so forth. So the way in which the bank is run is now dancing to the tune of the regulator, and you and I as customers of this bank don't matter anymore. We really don't. We're just there to make money out of our deposits, and when it comes to security, if we don't like it, walk across the street and the bank doesn't give a damn.
Right, and the thing is, we're not even really making money on our savings now, so we're saving our checkings. Well,
exactly, and the central bank suppressed the interest rate, so we're not making anything on that. In fact, it's negative. I know that they say that the consumer price index is only rising by 0.8% or something. Rubbish. It's rising by more. What's your experience, Mike, in Detroit? I mean, you finding prices rising?
Prices overall are increasing, yes. It's just that the small day-to-day things, like right now, gas is a lot cheaper than it was last year, so everything appears to be good, because gas being a major expense out of people's budget is not as bad as it was last year. But yet your day-to-day items, like your food, things like that, I know milk went up, you know, eggs. I mean, just the basics that, you know, tend to go unnoticed or untalked about have risen, yes. A lot more than the 1.8 or whatever they say the CPI inflation is. So
Yeah.
I've learned to not really pay attention to the reported numbers. And so that's why I follow guys like you for the more detailed numbers of, you know, behind the scenes things.
Well, it's, I mean, the thing that's amazing is that you know what the answer is,
Yeah.
but in the central banks, they really don't believe there's any inflation out there.
Yeah, clearly
It's
they have
amazing.
to know. They have to know, but they keep it cool and they just follow the typical jargon of everything's fine. We're in a economic recovery. Everything is great. And speaking of which, you know, coming down towards the end, I want to get your thought on the current economic recovery we're experiencing.
Well, I stand the whole thing on its head slightly because GDP is a nonsense figure. It's just an accounting total.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, without going into too much explanation, if you just chuck a whole load of money into an economy, then obviously the total amount of money spent in that economy is going to increase. That's called GDP.
Mm-hmm.
But it just gives you no idea as to whether that increase in GDP is being spent on things which people actually want or any good. You know, I mean, if government spends more, that's an increase in GDP, but economically it's actually quite destructive. So it's rubbish. The only thing I can say about measuring the economy is that you can't measure the one thing that matters, and that is progress. We all seek progress. I mean, I don't know about you, but you know, in this country, we have now flat screen televisions.
Oh, yeah.
10 years ago, we had these big, heavy things, you know?
Yeah.
And these flat screen televisions are getting bigger. I mean, you know, if I just work my sort of, I don't know, 8 hours a day or whatever and sit in front of the sofa watching football with a can of lager, you know, I have got the most wonderful facility for doing it now. Now, that's progress.
Yeah.
That is progress. So, but you can't measure progress. Now, progress is fine. We're all benefiting from progress, so long as we're earning. And that's the problem. That is the problem. And the level of unemployment in America, and this is another statistical thing, which beef, if you like, the level of unemployment in America is far higher than the statistics say. I mean, far, far higher.
Right.
And I think it's probably the same in this country too. But America seems to be a past master at coming out with incredibly optimistic statistics.
Right.
So the answer to your question about the economy is I don't think it's in nearly as good shape as the statistics suggest.
Right. Now, and wrapping this up, now the most important, I guess, part of your research and your study is you're a sound money guy. And so we haven't had a chance much to really get into the importance of sound money as a part of everyone's personal possession. Give me your thoughts on what's going on currently with the the pricing and things like that, and all the as you mentioned out east, they're encouraging their citizens to look into that type of thing for investment and retirement sake. And here in the West, it's not really encouraged or really talked about much. And even here in America, we have a lot of we buy gold. Kiosks and things like that around pretty much on every corner. And so give me your thoughts on sound money and the importance of it in this day and age.
Yeah, well, gold is sound money. I mean, it has been ever since man sort of discovered that there was such a thing as metal in the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that many people who listen to this won't have the opportunity to go to the museum in Cairo and look at the mask of Tutankhamun. That's 3,000 years old, and it's new. It looks like new. It is absolutely staggering. I mean, the beauty of gold, that is where its value actually originated. Mm-hmm. And by having that beauty, we know that its durability and all the rest of it, the fact that it never ever disappears, except when it's stolen. But that is why it is good as money, because we know that it has value, if you like, in another sense, in a non-monetary sense. Paper currencies do not have that. Paper currencies rely entirely on trust that piece of paper actually has the purchasing power, which we know it had yesterday, but may not have in the future. So it's very, very important for governments to actually understand that trust thing. Now, the longer a paper currency has been in circulation, then the greater the trust that tends to accumulate in that paper currency. So something like the dollar or the pound, which has evolved out of being exchangeable for gold, and therefore really rather, if you like, rather like a gold token, as it were, a convenient gold token, that is now completely unbacked by gold because there's no convertibility offered to you. You can't go into a bank and say, I want to change this $10 for a piece of gold or whatever. You can't do that. I can't do that with sterling either. So that's gone. So it's entirely fiat. But newer currencies like the euro, I think, are potentially at risk if the central banks play the euro game the way in which the Fed plays with the dollar. And I think this is one reason why we're seeing that currency weaken at the moment. I'm getting off topic slightly.
Oh no, not a problem. No. And I'm definitely learning. No, I just want to find out your take on precious metals in this day and age. And so
right, okay, yeah, okay. Well, going back to that, I mean, because this trust thing, particularly with all the debt that is around, the future obligations that governments face in welfare payments and all the rest of it, the net present value of that is really quite tremendous. And by net present value, I mean, the estimated cost, if you like, of all those welfare payments in the future, if they bring them back into today's money, what's it going to cost? We're talking very, very big numbers. So there is a question mark over the future survivability of currencies, paper currencies, and this is likely to become a very, very important question if there is a financial crisis, or if there is, let's say, even a collapse in the markets or Greece defaults or something like that. There are all sorts of accidents out there which could make us fundamentally look at the value of paper currencies and their purchasing power and reassess them. Now, from that point of view, it makes sense to have some insurance, if you like, in the form of ownership of the oldest money in the world, which has stood the test of time, and that is gold or possibly silver. Now, you could speculate as to which one is going to rise furthest in terms of dollars, but and I don't intend to do that. But what I would like to do is to just get over the idea that your long-term savings should have an element of that insurance protection in case currencies fall over. Because when paper currencies fall over, if they do fall over, or if they just continue to lose the sort of purchasing power that we've seen, you said, over the last 95 years, if they continue on that drift, and there's every indication that they will, not on a straight line, but certainly, there'll be times when the purchasing power of the dollar really falls, there'll be times when it stabilizes a bit, and so on and so forth, then gold will tend to work to protect your investments.
Yeah, I do agree. Mr. McLeod, I appreciate you joining us. Can you please give us a heads up as to where the audience can find your work and to stay in tune with what you have going on?
Yes, surely, Mike. I'm head of research at Gold Money, as you said earlier, and that's at goldmoney.com. And I also have my own site, which is financeandeconomics.org. And those are the URLs.
Sounds good. Mr. McLeod, I appreciate you joining us. Look forward to hopefully staying in contact with you and getting some more in-depth education as days go forward.
That's very much my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
This concludes part 2 of my discussion with Alasdair Macleod. I hope you found this discussion to be very edutaining. Visit goldmoney.com as well as financeandeconomics.org to follow Alasdair's work. Click the subscribe button below for more interviews to come. And also, visit rethinkingthedollar.com where you have a chance to test your money IQ with a quiz, as well as get a copy of my free ebook, The Simplicity of Money. Also, visit me on Facebook where I share monetary news daily. I'll see you soon. Thank you.